Now that we have our modifiers written, we can use them in our function definitions. Let's write the constructor function now to initialize original values of the two variables, the owner and the SKU count. Okay, so let's look at the constructor function right there. We're making it public. Okay, and so this is a function that is going to be called automatically whenever the contract is initiated. That is how constructor functions work. Now this will be useful to, of course, initialize any variables that we wanted to initialize before any of the other functions are run. Okay, so what we're doing in that is that we're actually having the constructor function and we're setting a few properties for this function. We're of course making it public, and so we want to make sure that it can be accessed by whoever initiates the contract. Now within this function, we will set the variables owner to the MSC.sender and the SKU count to 0 as a starting point. And that's it. Okay, so when this contract is initiated, the constructor will run and set the owner to the address of the contract initiator, and it will also set the SKU count to 0. In terms of a supply chain, the seller or the owner of this lemonade supply chain gets initialized to the address of the contract initiator. Now let's look at the add function, add item function. So we've done the constructor function. Let's look at the add item function right there. Fantastic. Now we're going to make it public. Okay, it will also accept two arguments. Okay, the name of the lemonade item and the price of the item. So when we're adding an item, we're of course giving the name of the item and the price of the item. And we're also applying the modifier only owner, so that only the owner of the lemonade stand can add items to the supply chain. The overall goal of this function is to add items to the inventory. We start by incrementing the SKU count by 1. Remember, we set it to 0 initially in the constructor function. So what we're doing is that we're actually incrementing it because we're now adding an item. So you want to give it a SKU of 1 to start with. Okay, and so every time we add a new item, this function is called and the SKU count is incremented. So every new item has a unique SKU count. Okay, and then we will create a new item. So in this line, if you see over here, we're actually creating, we're also in fact emitting an event over here. We'll look at it in just a second, but we're also creating a new item over here. If you look in this line, we will use the name and the price arguments passed in. The SKU count is of course maintained within our contract and the state is set to sale. So we're adding a new item to our mapping. Items is the mapping, remember. SKU count is the SKU count, and then this is the struct. We're creating a new struct. We're giving the name to whatever name is passed in. So we're just creating a new item. That's it. And we're adding it to the mapping and we're storing it in using the SKU count. Okay, and we're also emitting an event over here, and this event, just in case if anyone is watching for sale event, that we have a new item that's being added for sale. Also wanted to show you here, we're also setting the state to sale. Okay, we're setting the seller to MSC.sender. Again, in our case, it's just the owner. We're also setting the buyer to 0 right now, just because we don't have a buyer yet. Later on, when we write the buy item function, whoever is buying the item, we will change this value to the buyer's address. Okay, all right. So now we've written out two of our functions. We have the constructor function, which sets the initial values of the lemonade owner SKU count, and the add item function, which allows new items to be put up for sale. At this point, we have just two functions left to write, buy item and fetch item. Let's do that next.